Hi everyone, I'm the Tax Pro, and today we're going to talk about starting a business. So, we get a lot of people that come to our firm and they say, "Hey, we're starting a business. We have no idea where to go from here. Can you help us?" So, starting a business can seem a little bit overwhelming. I'm going to walk you through registering your business, what that looks like, and how to know where you need to register and if you need to register. Okay, and what is a business from a tax perspective. So one of the first things I'm assuming that you've done, so you've determined how you want to make money. So you've determined if you're going to sell a product, provide a service, a combination, and you have that portion figured out. You have the idea behind your business. You might not have anything else ready, and that's okay. So one of the first things that you have to do is you have to determine your legal structure, and you have to legally register your business if you're going to. Okay? We're not a law firm, so when I talk about the legal side of things, we always just recommend you really need an attorney to look at it. An attorney is a great first investment for a business. Reason being is I can save you all the money in taxes. It doesn't matter. If that money can be seized during a lawsuit, it doesn't matter what I've saved you. Okay? An attorney helps you legally protect your assets. Now, the attorney may say you don't have to legally register your business. They might recommend an LLC or a limited liability company. They may recommend a corporation, or they may recommend a variety of other legal structures. Those are the three most common things that we see. A lot of very small businesses, when they first start, they're not formed in any sort of legal way. Most commonly, we see LLCs. That doesn't mean that's the most protective. We also see corporations a lot. It just kind of depends on your business, the activities you're doing, and what your attorney has recommended. That's the first step, is getting legally registered if you need to be. From a tax perspective, you do not have to have a legal formation in order to have a business. Okay, that's really confusing for a lot of people. You don't have to have like an LLC or a corporation in order to have what the IRS would consider a business. The IRS considers a business an activity that meets certain factors. Okay, so if you're making money in an activity, the IRS is going to consider it a business or a hobby. We want the IRS to consider it a business for a number of reasons, but this is when the IRS, generally I should say, sometimes there's instances where we're like, this is a hobby and that's the most beneficial. But if we're starting a business and we want the IRS to consider it a business, these are the factors that the IRS looks at if they do a hobby loss audit, which I'll discuss in another video because it's more complex than what I want to cover here. But these are the factors that the IRS looks at. And what it boils down to is the IRS is looking to determine if you have a primary profit motive in this activity. So you're doing this activity because you want it to be profitable and you want to make money doing it. Or you want to make money selling it or something along those lines, right? The IRS is looking for a primary profit motive when it comes to a business. Now, once you've determined that you do have a primary profit motive, it is technically a business, where do we go from there? Your structure on how your business is taxed starts with how you are legally structured and the number of owners in the business. If you do not have a formal legal structure for your business, and you have one owner, you are automatically by default taxed as a sole proprietorship. Okay? You are by default taxed as a sole proprietorship. The majority of sole proprietorships file Schedule C. If you are a sole proprietorship, you do not necessarily need to register with the IRS for an EIN number. I will go over when you have to. If you have like employees, then you need to get an EIN number, okay? Even if you're not required to get an EIN letter or number though, you can. You just, if you're a sole proprietorship, you don't have any employees, you don't necessarily have to have an EIN number. You don't necessarily have to tell the IRS that you're there, okay? If you have no formal structure and you have 2 or more owners, you are by default, from the IRS perspective, taxed as a partnership. You have to register with the IRS at that point in time. There is a small exception for spouses that go into business together, so the only people who own that business are 2 spouses. You could potentially elect to be treated as a qualified joint venture. Okay, I'm not going to go into that because that's an exception. But if you have 2 or more owners and you are not formally legally registered, you are by default taxed as a partnership and you need to get an EIN. LLC is the same thing. So if you have an LLC and it is owned by one person, you are a sole proprietorship. Even though from a legal perspective you are an LLC, technically you are taxed on the federal level the same way you would be taxed if you did not have a legal formed company. A lot of people don't understand that and it confuses them. They're like, well, I have an LLC. Yes, you do have an LLC from a legal perspective. However, from a tax perspective, you are actually taxed as a sole proprietorship. Okay? LLC with 2 or more owners is by default taxed as a partnership. Okay? That is your default tax treatment and you have to get an EIN. That's how you let the IRS know that you exist. Now, an LLC can also be taxed, depending on circumstances, as an S corporation and a C corporation. Those require elections. In those cases, you have to have an EIN. Okay? So a LLC that has 1 owner could elect to be taxed as an S corporation as long as they meet the requirements, which we'll touch in a different video. You have to have an EIN for that. Okay? Same with the C corporation. Now, if you have a corporation that you have formed, so you've legally registered a corporation, by default you're taxed as a C corporation and you have to get an EIN. Okay? So what it boils down to is the only people who are actually not required to register with the IRS when they start a business is if you have a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships are going to be businesses that are either not legally registered or they're like an LLC and there's 1 owner. Okay? There's no employees, then you don't have to have an EIN. And you're not subject to any sort of like weird tax because of your industry. All other businesses have to have an EIN. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't want an EIN if you're a sole proprietor, okay? You may want an EIN if you're a sole proprietor. You might have like a bank, for example, that says, hey, we're not going to open up a bank account for your LLC. Even though it's taxed as a sole proprietorship, we're not going to open up that bank account unless you give us an EIN. Okay? EINs. Applying for EINs is free. You don't have to pay somebody to apply for an EIN. When you go and you like Google like apply for an EIN, you get all these sponsor links that are like, oh, we'll apply for an EIN, give us $100. They go on here and they spend a couple of minutes. They fill out the EIN application and then you get your EIN. This is a free process, okay? Now that doesn't mean that it's not a valuable service. I've seen people mess this up before and do some wonky stuff that has created kind of a headache. But you can actually apply for your EIN online for free. It's just, you go through, and this has a great set of information too on like, do you need an EIN? This is a warning, you're only supposed to use it for authorized use. So right here, do I need an EIN? This gives you great information. So you need an EIN if you started a new business. The exception here is if you're a sole proprietorship, okay? And you don't have any employees, and you don't have any sort of like weird tax that you need to pay. If you hired or will hire employees, you need an EIN. Now, right here it says open a bank account that requires an EIN for banking purposes. Right here it tells you, hey, your bank might require you to have an EIN even if we don't, right? So filling out this application, what ends up happening, you can fill it out online. You can also fill it out by paper. You fill it out online, literally you walk through questions. I'll go through the EIN application in a different video, but you'll go through questions. It will generate the letter right there for you. You're gonna get a letter generated called a CP 575. Keep that. That is your EIN letter. You will need it the rest of the life of the business. And they do not reissue that original EIN letter. You have to call and like get a copy made of an EIN letter. It's a pain. Keep your EIN letter, please. Keep the CP 575. You need that letter, okay? It will automatically generate, in almost every case, there's a couple of times where you'll get like a wonky exception or something. It will automatically generate here. Download it in a PDF. You'll immediately get assigned an EIN letter or number, and that is the number that you use to identify your business with the federal government, with the IRS, okay? That's how you register with the IRS. Start a business, get an EIN, that's how you register, okay? You need to form your company from a legal perspective first before you get the EIN. So if you're gonna register with your state as like an LLC or a corporation, do that first, then get your EIN. At that point in time, you have registered with the IRS. That CP 575 is also gonna tell you what tax returns the IRS is gonna expect to see from you. Really important you read that. If you've messed your EIN letter up or application up, you might see some wonky tax on there. Don't ignore that, please. Please take a look at it and figure out like what happened, what went wrong, because then you're gonna get some love letters from the IRS that say, hey, you didn't file this form that we think we need to see from you. Then if you ignore those, they'll send you a penalty and they'll send you fines. Don't ignore that. Look through, see what they expect to see from you, okay? That's your EIN application. Now, that gets you registered with the IRS, the federal government. When it comes to your state, you may have separate registration requirements from a tax perspective with your state and or with local jurisdictions. So cities, municipalities, that kind of thing. Those are state specific and locality specific. I'm not gonna cover those in this video just because that would be a horrendously long video. But if you have any questions on it, please feel free to ask and then we'll make a video for you. We intend to make videos for all 50 states, just give us a little bit of time. You may need to register though on a state level. Okay, so that's registering on the federal level. You may also have registrations needed on the city level or like a locality level. That's how you get your business registered. That is the start to your business. Where do we go from here? We then need to set up record keeping, all that good stuff. That's gonna be in future videos. If you want like a structure to follow, please follow the link in this video and it'll get you set up with a school program essentially that's free. And then you can go through and follow along setting up your business. If I could ask you to please like and subscribe, that helps us be able to create free content for you guys. It helps us essentially get paid from somebody that's not you to help you. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video.